Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parents. In today's episode, my crazy father assaulted me over a casserole and he got away with it. The 6 months of living with my monster of an entitled father after dropping out of college. I'm having ankle surgery, and the only one who has no hope is my entitled dad who thinks everything will go wrong if he's not calling the shots. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My crazy father assaulted me over a casserole and he got away with it. So, this is something that happened to me a long time ago, and something I've debated putting on a place like this. But I've decided that people need to know how horrible my father is. This is something I've told close friends before, and this is the first, but certainly not the only, horrible event regarding my father. Do also note that this is the farthest back I can remember. Context: I am a 28M turning 29 next month, and this took place when I was very little, either 4 or 5 years old. It was in the summer just before my 5th or 6th birthday. At the time, my parents, younger brother, who was a baby at the time, and I were living in a middle of nowhere town close to family members. Dad worked a job and my mom was the stay-at-home wife, aka the typical family dynamic of the 90s/beginning of 2000s. During this particular day, my mom was doing errands with my grandma, her mom, and brought my brother with her, so it was just my dad and I. A co-worker of his was camping at a nearby campground that we frequently visited when we lived there, and my dad decided to get the camper trailer and camp out that weekend. We get there, and I'm invited to play with the other kids, including the 2 boys of the co-worker, who were either my age or a bit older than me. There was a nearby creek that was a popular swimming area for the kids, in spite of the potential cottonmouth snake, but being in the southern USA you're taught at a very young age to always keep an eye out for snakes. I bring this up because I loved to swim as a kid, and my dad strictly told me to not get close to the creek, because he didn't want me swimming just yet. There was a pool not far from the campground that I believe he was planning on taking me until things went south. However, while I was playing with the kids, I ended up tripping on a rock and tumbling into said creek and getting completely drenched. I was, and still am, a great swimmer, and the creek wasn't really deep, so I wasn't in any danger, but I was afraid my dad would be mad. The co-workers' kids were willing to vouch for me that I fell in by accident. We went to my dad's trailer, and sure enough, he immediately got mad, yelling at me that I wasn't supposed to go swimming. Although this is the farthest I remember back, I know that even then I was scared of him when he was mad, and I ended up being quiet as you couldn't say anything when he was mad without making the situation worse. The 2 boys fulfilled their promise to try and defend me, telling my dad it was an accident, only for my dad to tell them both to scram as he dragged me inside. I was tossed into the bathroom, as in literally thrown inside, with a towel and some dry clothes, and told me to quickly change. I did so without saying a single word. Even after I did what was told, he was still fuming. We were going to the co-worker's trailer for lunch, and my dad threatened me, or as he would say, promised, as he said all his threats were promises because he always intended to act out on his threats, that if I screw up one more time, I'll regret it. At the co-worker's trailer, the lunch was some kind of casserole. Like many kids, I was, and still am to some extent, a picky eater, so I already decided I wasn't hungry. But it took one blare of pure anger from my dad to get me to start eating. Within a couple bites I was getting nauseous, and I put the fork down and said I was no longer hungry. My dad flipped. He immediately started screaming at me to eat every bite of the casserole, and that I wasn't leaving that spot until I did so. The co-worker, bless his heart, tried to be a mediator by saying I didn't have to eat the food if I didn't like it, and that he has no problem making me a sandwich. My dad told him to shut up, and threatened to sock him if he said another word. The next 5 minutes was me bawling my eyes out, slowly eating the casserole as my dad was screaming right next to my ear about how he's gonna beat the shit out of me if I didn't do what he says. 4th bite in, my stomach turned, and I fell off the chair and threw up. I felt him grab me by the hair and dragging me to the trailer, me wailing for him to not be mad at me. I will note that my parents were the type of parents to have a wooden paddle for spanking, but at the time it was only my mom who had the paddle, as she had enough restraint to make sure I didn't feel anything more than a slight sting to get the point across for why I was in trouble. And my dad proved he had zero restraint, as he yanked my pants off and swung the first blow. It was an agonizing strike that was so strong I immediately stopped crying and felt numb, like he smacked all senses out of me. He swung a second time, and I blacked out. The rest happened from the testimony of my grandma, as I was unconscious for 2 hours. While I was getting struck, my coworker called my mom in a panic, telling her to go to the campgrounds immediately, fearing for the well-being of myself. My mom and grandma immediately drove from their destination a little over an hour and a half drive to the campground. Unfortunately, my dad stormed out after striking me several times in blind fury, and threatened to beat the shit out of the coworker and his kids if they ever mentioned what they witnessed, and the coworker fled. I don't know if my dad attempted to hurt the coworker and his kids, but considering how bloodthirsty he was, I wouldn't be surprised. My mom and grandma pulled up to see my dad sitting on a chair in front of the trailer, still fuming. He immediately told them both that I got what I deserved and I was making him look bad. They both went into the trailer to see me face down, pants off, bottom of my back to the upper half of my thighs nearly black from bruising. My mom thought I was dead, and it took my grandma finding my pulse to find out that I was still alive. Just unconscious. My grandma floored it to the town's police station. There was no service for phones in that area at the time, and my mom stayed behind to make sure my dad didn't try to hurt me any further. That's when I regained conscious and saw my grandma driving off. Thing is, my dad had no remorse for what he did, even saying that he couldn't care less if he killed me or not. He didn't even bother to check if I was still alive after continuously striking me until the cops were involved. He went inside and laid out a sob story about how he didn't mean to hurt me like that and "Dad always love you, bud." Being the innocent kid I was, I believed him, but now I know it was just a lie to relieve himself of guilt. I wish I could say that he went to prison and I never had to deal with him again. But that wasn't the case. My mom did have plans to fully divorce him and hold all charges on him, but when she visited him in the county jail, he thoroughly convinced her that she couldn't afford the divorce, which my mom confirmed was true, and that my brother and I can't survive without him, not to mention how she would be a social outcast for being a single mom. How true this was, but this was the very end of the 90s / just before 2000. He also laid it thick that even in the case she got her kids away from him, my dad will not rest until he killed her and took my brother and I to where nobody would ever see us again. My mom tried to remain brave, but the threats worked, mostly due to how he was back to having no remorse over what he did to me. He was just upset he got caught. So my mom dropped the charges and she still lived with him until I was turning 11. However, the whole family was well aware of what he did, and they made it clear if he hurt me like that again, or hurt my mom and brother like that, they will not hesitate to call the cops. The only thing that managed to do was make my dad much smarter about how to abuse us, sticking more to scaring the daylights out of us and making us feel like accidents who nobody loves with his words than bruising us up with his fists, and when he did physically hurt my mom, brother, and I, he did so in ways that could be covered up. As for how he is today, he's not as physically aggressive as he used to be, but he's become even more heartless and unfiltered on his words, and continues to believe that he does no wrong, and even has the right to hurt his kids, even when said kids are now adults. I have much more to say about the shit this monster has done, and I might tell more of what he's done to me in my life. But for now, I just wanted to say how he assaulted me over a casserole, and how he managed to get away with it. And this is why parents should not be able to choose whether to press child abuse charges after they've been brought to the police. Ever. Agreed. The worst part though, is that after my mom and dad divorced and my brother and I were forced to live with him, which is a whole nother post, he did a similar thing to my brother for standing up to our dad's BS. And once again, charges were dropped, though in this case it was because he managed to convince us into believing he'd hunt us down if we were honest to CPS, so we sadly lied about the event when questioned. I just hope that you're not in contact with this psychopath. I'm sure that when he is feeble enough that he'll be thrown into a home, but I think that that's too good for him because he just sounds like he enjoyed beating the hell out of you and your family. Has he still kept up trying to threaten you, or have you actually stood up to him since that incident and tell him that he tries and he's going on the ground? Cause he sounds like if somebody stands up to him he'll back down really quick if they are bigger and stronger than him. The 6 months of living with my monster of an entitled father after dropping out of college. Hello. Felt like telling more about my entitled father, more specifically the 6 months of me living under his roof. Context: by this time I was 19 years old, so it would be about 10 years ago this day. Sadly dropped out of college within months of starting because of a variety of problems, mostly from depression and stress that wasn't helped by my mom trying to tell me what to do. My mom and dad were long divorced by this point. I ended up moving to my dad's, who at the time had zero internet at the home. It was, in the words of my dad, punishment for me, throwing away my one chance at being useful to this world, and I worked as a cashier at a restaurant chain in the nearby town. My dad lived and still lives out in the country. I would say things were rather uneventful, but he made sure that wouldn't be the case by being his usual EF self. Some of these things were brief and usual, like him screaming at me for doing anything leisurely instead of working 24/7, like watching TV or going for a walk, like he does when he's off work, or belittling me for trying to start drawing as a hobby, calling it a sissy thing. Here's some of the extreme things he did in those 6 months. One of the first things he did was shortly after I got my job. Things were going relatively well at the job despite one woman who found me just as pathetic as my dad did. Thank God she wasn't in any management positions and that the manager and boss didn't like her behavior any more than I did, and some customers calling me the R word for making some errors. However, as par for the course of a part-time job, even back then, I wasn't working much and wasn't getting that much money. I did have a talk with the boss about the hours, and about how some days she'll send me home early if there was no business, but she said it was something she had to do. When I told my dad, he wasn't happy. He told me I had to make her give me more hours. I told her that if she said she can't, then she can't. He suddenly punched the wall right next to me and had the glare that I've come to recognize at the "I'm going to hurt you if you make me angrier" look, so now I was scared for my well-being. He told me that now that he got me scared, I'm willing to do whatever he wanted to keep myself safe. He then went on a rant about how real men get what they want by making promises to hurt and kill. You hurt and kill those who stand in your way, you hurt and kill those you don't like, you hurt and kill those who hold you back. If you don't do that, son, then you're not a man, you're a mistake. Although I didn't tell my manager what he did, I did tell her that he might go to her angry once he finds out she has to send me home early if business is dead. She simply said that if he does so, or if he bruises me up, she'll call the cops, and she told him that directly. I was punished by being given sudden rent that costed most of my monthly amount of paychecks. Next, how I almost died from his negligence. He's one of those country folk who heats up the house with a furnace. I know, those big cube-like iron things that are like a combination of fireplace and heater? Yeah, one of those. Well, on this day, I had a night shift, and my dad was going to be out of the area until very late due to work, so my grandpa, his dad, offered to take me to work and back. I was enjoying the day to myself, doing what I wanted, watching whatever was on TV that caught my eye, drawing, or at least attempting to draw some doodles, playing games, etc. By the time it got to the afternoon, I found I was oddly sleepy, so I decided to lay on the bed and close my eyes for an hour or two, just enough time to get a bit more energy in me for a potentially busy night. The local high school was having a game that night, and every game night was a busy night, but also so that I'll have plenty of time to get ready. I closed my eyes and was shaken awake by my grandpa, who looked absolutely relieved that I was conscious. In my blurry state, I heard an alarm going off, and he had me grab my work clothes and phone and took me to his house nearby to help me get my head clear before changing and going to work. What had happened was the furnace was not properly cared for, and there was a lot of gunk blocking the pipe leading outside, and the house was slowly but steadily being filled with carbon monoxide. It didn't take long to get better once I was able to breathe clean air, and although I was a bit woozy, I managed to work as much as I could. It wasn't a long shift, about 3 or 4 hours, and my grandma was the one who picked me up. She said my dad got home not too long ago, and they managed to clear the carbon monoxide of the home pretty quick, and my grandpa was scolding the hell out of my dad. Sure enough, when I got home, my grandpa was pissed at my dad, and to my surprise, his sister was also there, scolding him as well. However, he was not once remorseful over what happened. He was annoyed they were getting on his case. Even when they tried to hammer in the fact that there was a chance I could have died, he simply scoffed. Well, he didn't. So stop making this a big deal. I did move out of his place very quickly, thankfully. A few months after the carbon monoxide incident, my job unfortunately burned to the ground from an electrical fire, and I had the choice to either carpool to the next nearest location of 40 minutes away, or find a different job. I chose the latter, and my grandma, mom's mom, offered to move me to her town as there was far more job opportunities there than where I was living at. Of course, my dad was not happy about that. He went to my account, to which I now know he did the usual entitled parent thing of having the account be a joint account so he could get in without my permission, and took a huge chunk of money. His excuse was the rest of this year's rent. My grandma tried to find a legal way to get the money back, but since it was a joint account, we were told he technically didn't break any law, though I'm certain that the person who said that was wrong. And while I was packing up to move, my dad constantly told me how much of a disappointment I am, how I'm the reason my parents got a divorce, how I deserved all the abuse and bullying I got, and that nobody likes or tolerates me. My grandma did put him in his place, but that just escalated to where he told me he wishes I was a miscarriage. Although I regret not talking to my grandma about cutting him off then, I had no idea back then you could even do such a thing. That was the beginning of me slowly going low contact with him, only talking to him whenever I had to. Let dad know that when he is feeble and needs to be in a rest home, that you will remember exactly how he treated you. Because you will be finding the cheapest crap hole there is and dropping him off, never to see you ever again. Also, you will be selling off all of his stuff as fast as you can to make up for 1, the money he stole, and 2, treating you like crap for years. Also, mention that based on his rules, you should take a baseball bat to his head when he is sleeping, since that is what men do. Yeah, that'll happen if he's lucky enough to even still be in my life by then. I hope you are doing well, and grandmom is still there for you. Your sperm donor is an AH. My grandma is in her 70s but still kicking. She continues to be a major support system in my life even when I live several hours away from her. I honestly doubt I'd be alive if she wasn't around in my life. I'm having ankle surgery, and the only one who has no hope is my entitled dad, who thinks everything will go wrong if he's not calling the shots. Hello everyone. Now I got a very recent story to tell about my monster of an entitled dad, about how he has no hope for my upcoming surgery and thinks that without him making the decisions it'll all go wrong. Context: in a couple of weeks I'll be having an ankle fusion. I've been having extreme pain in my ankle for quite a while, and in the last few years it has gotten worse and worse, and the orthopedic doctor has decided on an ankle fusion. The game plan is for me to stay a few nights in the hospital and about 2 weeks at a physical rehabilitation facility to help me learn how to use a walker. I have a bleeding disorder which requires some staying in the hospital, and they decided rehabilitation would be good since I live alone. As for the walker, they decided that was better for me than crutches, but I also have a wheelchair coming in too. Everyone's hopeful about the procedure. I am hopeful, my mom's hopeful, my family's hopeful, my friends are hopeful, my GF is hopeful. The only one who isn't is my dad. The only reason I told him was because I thought it'd be better to just tell him instead of getting even angrier for keeping the surgery a secret. See, he's very anti-doctor, and in the last few years has been going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole of alternative medicine. During the pandemic, he wanted to sign me up for this pyramid scheme involving pine needle tea to give me COVID immunity and to cure me of my autism, and not too long ago he sent a video from an alternative medicine lady who was talking about how no processed sugar and no gluten will cure you of autism. He's been very persistent that I'll be a better person for the world overall if my autism is cured, and how mental illnesses are not real, but fabricated by doctors to kill you to take your money. Just a bunch of bullshit. And now he's spouting off about how ankle fusion will not work. He started rambling about how, with the limited mobility, I won't be able to exercise, and will therefore become fatter and less desirable to everyone. I do have a weight problem, as well as internalized fat phobia thanks to him. I told him how the doctors will plan to give me modified shoes to help me walk, but then he went off about how that'll break my ankle. I told him I'll have physical therapy to help me use a walker on one foot while I'm non-weight bearing, and then after the healing they'll do more physical therapy to help me walk normally again, and how I'll have a wheelchair to help me get around if I need to go out. He snapped about how I'm not listening to him, and that it's proof that I need family, more specifically him, in my life. He demanded that my mom either have me stay with her for the entire recovery process, or that I stay with him for the entire recovery process. I stood my ground and told him that's not necessary, that we already have a plan, and that I trust these doctors. That made him really mad, with him yelling if I trust strangers more than family. I firmly told him that is not what I meant, and that just because he's not confident in the game plan doesn't mean he has to be doom and gloom about it. Surprisingly, that made him realize that he wasn't gonna get to me, and huffed that if I want to try then fine, but that if something goes wrong I'm gonna regret not taking his help. This may not have been as bad as what he did in the past, but I felt like it was worth sharing. I do want to end on a positive note. I still have plans to cut him out, and I'm already mentally prepared for a life without him, as nowadays his words no longer hurt me like they used to. I'm no longer afraid of him. I'm simply annoyed at his existence, and annoyed how he'll always be an entitled, pathetic, piece of shit of a father. I trust a doctor's medical opinion more than a family member who thinks YouTube is a valid source of information, and is easily duped by conmen. Yes. Is he paying for this surgery? Do you live with him? Are you in any way dependent on him? I understand yes to any of the above can make it more complicated. If not, tell him flat out that you are under the care of your medical team and it's not open for discussion. And if he kicks off on the phone, hang up. If you're at his place or in public, leave. If you're at yours, ask him to leave. Shut him down. All the best with your surgery and recovery. As stated at the end, I already told him off that I have full trust in my medical team and their plan for recovery, and that him having issues with the plan is not my fault nor responsibility. He's just pissy that he's not around to make sure things go his way. I live on the other side of the country, something he also hates. Make sure that there is no way anywhere that he can get any power of attorney over you for medical purposes. If he gets that angry and up in arms over your medical news, then just cover yourself. Don't let him call himself your next of kin so he can get into the hospital and cause problems. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.